Today, we are diving into one of the most powerful, essential tools in all of SQL, aggregation. Look, this isn't just about writing code. It's about how you turn these massive mountains of raw data into something that actually makes sense. It's how you find the story that's hiding inside all those numbers.
So you've got access to the data. Maybe it's a ton of sales records, user activity, sensor readings, millions, maybe even billions of rows. And that's a huge asset for sure, but let's be real. It can also be completely overwhelming. A list of 1 million sales isn't an insight. It's just noise. The real question is, what do you do with it? How do you even begin to make sense of it all?
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big idea, what aggregation even means. Then we'll get into your basic toolkit, the absolute must-know functions. After that, we unlock the real superpower, grouping your data. Then we'll tackle a classic, that crucial difference between filtering rows versus filtering groups. We'll pull it all together by building some real-world reports, and finally, we'll talk about why getting this down is an absolute game changer for your career.
All right, first things first. Let's really get to the heart of what we're even talking about when we say aggregation. It sounds fancy, but it's a surprisingly simple concept with some seriously profound implications. I want you to just think back to grade school for a second. If your teacher asks how many students are in the class, you wouldn't stand up and read out every single person's name, right? Of course not. You just give a number, like 25. You just performed an aggregation. You took a bunch of individual things, the students, and you summarized them into one single meaningful answer. That's really all it is at its core.
Now, let's take that super simple idea and plug it into the professional world. Aggregation is the engine that powers pretty much every business dashboard you have ever laid eyes on. That sales report, the KPI tracker on the wall, an analytics chart. They are all running on aggregated data. We're taking thousands, maybe millions of individual transactions and boiling them down to answer questions that drive huge business decisions.
Okay, so to perform this data magic, we need a toolkit. And SQL gives us this handful of core functions that do all the heavy lifting for us. Let's meet the big five.
You know, the beautiful thing about these functions is how they map directly to simple human questions. Count is just asking, how many are there? Sum is asking, what's the grand total? And AVG, min, and max, well, they help us instantly understand the range of our data and what a typical value looks like. These 5 are the absolute bedrock of any kind of data analysis.
Okay, those functions are great, but on their own, they just give you one big number for the entire table. To unlock the real insights, we have to introduce the true superpower of aggregation, the group by clause. This right here is where things get really, really interesting. So, what's the big deal? Well, it's all about the kind of question you can ask. Without group by, you can only ask for the total of all students combined, one number. But with group by, you can now ask for the total per class, or per city, or per product category. See the difference? We've just made the leap from a single, kind of boring number to a detailed, segmented analysis. Now, with this great power comes one very, very important rule you have to remember. You cannot mix individual level details with your group level summaries. Think about it like this. You can ask for the count of students in a city, no problem. But you can't also ask for the name of a single student in that same query. The database would just get confused. Which one of the hundreds of names for that city should it show you? It just doesn't make logical sense.
So the correct way is actually pretty simple. Every single column you select, every piece of information you ask for, must either be the thing you're grouping by, like the city, or an aggregate summary about that group, like the count of students. That's the golden rule. You're either talking about the group or a summary of the group. Stick to that and you'll be fine.
Okay, let's talk about something that trips up so many people, and I guarantee you it'll come up in an interview. What is the real difference between the where clause and the having clause? Nailing this shows you really truly get how SQL thinks.
The absolute key difference here is all about timing. Think of it this way. Where filters individual rows before they ever get bundled into groups. It's like being a bouncer at a party, deciding which individual people get to come inside. Having, on the other hand, filters the groups themselves, but only after they've already been formed. This is like looking at all the tables at the party and saying, okay, only the tables with more than 5 people get to stay. Before versus after. Rows versus groups.
And here's the secret to why that works. It's the logical order the database follows. First, it grabs the table. Second, where kicks in and throws out any individual rows that don't match your criteria. Then, and only then, does it group what's left. And after the groups are made, having finally gets its turn to filter those new groups. Understanding this sequence makes the difference between where and having crystal clear.
All right, that's enough theory. Let's put these building blocks together and see how they combine to create the kind of powerful summary reports that businesses rely on every single day.
So here's a classic business question. How much are we selling in each city? Easy. With aggregation, we just tell the database to group all our orders by city, and then for each one of those city groups, just sum up the sales amount. Boom! You get a clean, simple report that immediately tells you how each city is performing.
But let's take it a step further. We don't just want a list. We want to find our #1 top-performing city. So we use the exact same grouping logic as before, but then we just add on 2 more instructions. Sort the results from highest to lowest sales, and then just give us the top one. And just like that, we've gone from a general summary to a specific, actionable insight.
So we've covered the functions, the grouping, the filtering, the whole shebang. Now let's just zoom out for a second and really land on why this stuff is so incredibly important.
Look, this is not just some academic exercise. Aggregation is the absolute heart of business intelligence and data analytics. It's a skill that gets tested constantly in interviews because it proves you know how to think like an analyst. At the end of the day, it's the fundamental bridge that takes you from a chaotic swamp of raw data to the solid ground of clear, actionable insights that let businesses make smart decisions.
You know, this really says it all. Your raw data, all those millions of rows, it just tells you what happened. But aggregation is what tells you what it all means. It's the difference between just having information and having real understanding.
So now you have the toolkit. You get how to count and sum, how to group and filter. The power now is in the questions that you choose to ask. So what story is waiting inside your data just waiting for you to find it?